Hi, folks. We are in the Cobb TV studio for our weekly visit with Cobb Commission Chairman Mike Boyce. And Chairman, it's summertime. A lot of people have their minds elsewhere, but not you. It's a busy time, and it starts really on Monday.
Yeah, this is the old analogy where you see the duck swimming on the pond and you don't see the feet. The feet are pumping furiously under the water right now because we're coming up on the work session on Monday to finally nail down what this budget's going to look like for 2020 that we're going to vote on at the end of July. And I've said it once, I'm going to say it again. The discussion this year is totally different. Last year, the discussion was, how do we allocate the resources to meet the millage rate that we set that clearly isn't high enough to meet all our services. And my fight to raise the millage rate to a level that I believe will sustain our programs in the future in conjunction with the tax digest. And of course, it was a political risk, but without risk in life, you don't get anything accomplished. And that risk has turned out to be worth the effort because this summer, the discussion is totally different. The discussion this summer is about what do we do with the money that's been generated by the millage rate and the tax digest. And I've said this again several times, the most dangerous time is putting extra money in front of politicians. And that's our issue next week. Now, we already have the structure for the budget. I've been talking about it, well, at least since March with the town halls. But most of those ideas were out there since Christmas time. And I believe that most of those lines that you saw, if you came to the town halls or watched it here in our video, they'll be addressed at the work session on Monday because they're still viable. Once we nail down what it is the board decide, how they want to allocate the resources, then we have the 3 public hearings in July, and we'll culminate again like we did last year with voting on the millage rate and the budget the same night, which I believe is Tuesday, July 24th. So I think what everybody, this is an opinion, I haven't done any polls, but I think that what happened this year was that everybody heard there'll be no millage increase. They went to the beach. Right? I mean, I didn't have to come in this year on weekends and answer the constituents as to why I'm not closing their libraries, I'm not closing their baseball fields. There's just hardly any emails about that. I think people finally understand that in 2019, we are going to generate the revenue that we need to continue to support a 5-star county with 5-star services. And I'm confident the board on Monday will just work around, we'll work around so we can finally decide how exactly we want to direct those resources next year.
You mentioned it was dangerous to give a pot of money in front of politicians, but this year we've got clear needs for that money, and it starts with employees and public safety.
Yeah, well, I've said all along, my number one priority when I started out the town halls was increased compensation for all our public servants. And we got diverted a little bit there. The collateral benefit discussion was more increased compensation for our public safety officials. But I have to say that the process did exactly what it's supposed to do. By getting my proposals out there early enough to talk to the public, they come back and either affirm it or say they modify it, and that's what happened this year. There were no issues with what was on the chart, but they believed we needed to do more for our public safety. And to my immense relief and gratification, the revenue we're bringing in this year, without a tax increase, we're going to be able to probably do most of the things that I wanted to do, started proposing at Christmas time, plus provide public safety, members of the public safety, specifically our policemen, sheriff deputies, and firemen with increased compensation. And we've already started that step right now with the one-time bonuses that we passed last month.
You have the one-time bonus, you have the additional compensation that will be planned in the upcoming budget, and there's other items too being considered for public safety.
We're going to be, Tuesday night, we'll be addressing paying the premiums for the police officers' annuity. That also, I believe, for the firemen. The firemen have their own fund,
right,
but they'll take that out. But we'll be picking that up so they don't have to take that out of their paycheck anymore. We're also looking at some lateral entry programs where we're going to do now to other counties and cities what they're doing to us. We're going to go after their police officers and firemen, and if they're qualified, we'll bring them into our family, and those who recruit these officers will get a bonus, or a one-time recruiting bonus. And then, of course, as much as I'm pleased about what we're doing for public safety, I think it's important to emphasize that just about everybody in this county, if we pass the budget as I proposed it, everybody who works for the county, regardless of what elected office they serve in, will receive a compensation increase.
Yeah. And again, that all starts Monday with a work session,
Right.
and then the 3 public hearings that
Right.
people want to chime in on.
Right. The next month will be very, very intense as we stay focused and getting this budget passed.
And we'll be putting the dates for all those public hearings up on the website and all our social media too, coming so you can check those out. As we were talking before we started the taping here, there's been a number of kind of newsworthy items the county's been dealing with that really dovetails off legislation that's been enacted in Atlanta.
Yeah. There are many people in this county who will understand exactly what I'm about to say. I came in during the Vietnam War. I did not go to Vietnam. My father went to Vietnam, and I had other relatives who went there. But these warriors who came in during that time had to suffer the criticism and in some cases being reviled by the public for a policy that was enacted in Washington, D.C. They simply did their job. They went on, they were drafted, or they volunteered to go on active duty or in the reserves or the Guard, and they fulfilled their commitment to this country by going to war because they were told to go to war. And because they complied with that, they were criticized for it, when in fact, they should have been, those who were criticizing them should have been calling 202 area code in Washington, D.C. to talk to the legislature who sent these young men and women off to war. Well, we have that on a much smaller scale right now going on in Cobb County and in some parts of the metro area. And I'll talk about 2 of them, 287G and the sandwich issue where people are no longer allowed to make sandwiches in the privacy of their home and then bring them in to be passed out to those in need. And I'm not going to sit here and defend, talk about 287G as someone who's not compassionate about the problem. But 287G is a federal law. And when I took the oath of office to be the chairman of this county, as did every commissioner, as did every other elected official, our oath included, obeying the laws of the state and, for the most part, of this country. We don't have the option of selectively choosing which laws we want to enforce. Now, the reality is that there are so many laws out there, we can't possibly enforce all of them. I mean, I think if people saw the amount of legislation that goes that our police officers have to memorize every time they do a traffic stop, most of them would never want to be a police officer because of the homework involved there. But that's not selective enforcement. That's simply going up upon a situation, evaluating the situation, and then measuring against the criteria that were provided under the law. 287G is not a program that this county, Cobb County, is responsible for. That is a program that the sheriff has chosen by virtue of his office to enforce and become a partner with. We do not, at a board, have the authority to go in and tell the sheriff how to do his job. Now, we write the budget, but we do not have line item veto either. I can't go and take Sheriff Warren's budget and say that, well, I don't want you to buy 25 cars, or I want you to buy these kind of cars. When you start doing that kind of micromanaging, that's not within our purview. I think some people think that we should be doing that, but that's not how it works. The sheriff is an elected official, and I might add, he's a very popular elected official, probably next to the district attorney, the 2 most popular elected officials in this county. And he believes that it is within his authority, but most importantly, that it's in the best interest of public safety in this county to partner with the federal government to enforce 287G. So if people have a problem with 287G, the sheriff is not the people you should be dealing with, quite honestly. Nor should it be. If you want to come to the county and use your 5 minutes to talk about it, that's fine. Everybody is entitled to their 5 minutes. But if you have a problem with 287G, you need to be talking to your congressmen and your senators, because that's who passes that law. And the sheriff and other law enforcement are simply the face of enforcing a federal law. And I think it's important to remember that they believe that they have a duty to protect this country and this county. And if they believe that 287 is part of that, I understand that many don't agree with it. I'm sensitive to all that. The immigration situation in this country is something that's sad, all right, for many different ways and many different levels. But let's not go after those who are enforcing the law. If you have a problem with who's enforcing the law, go after those who created the law and get it changed that way. We have a process for doing that. The same thing happens with this sandwich issue. I realized that for years, people were making sandwiches at home. And do I believe that, we have, that there's situations at home that aren't safety-related issues? Of course there's some issues at home that are safety-related issues. And if we sit down and talk to our public health officials, they'll tell you what those circumstances are. But to go after the director of Cobb and Douglas County public health officials for enforcing a state law is, once again, you're missing the target. Their job is to enforce the state law. And they didn't go looking for this situation of people bringing sandwiches into Must Ministry. It just happened to be, a coincidence that when they were over there inspecting Must Ministry, they saw people offloading sandwiches into Must Ministry, and they asked where the sandwiches came from. And when they found the source of it, they went to the state, and the state said you have to enforce the law. So again, if you have a problem with the sandwich law, well, I get that. I'm not tone deaf, and I don't think anyone at public health is or is Must Ministry. But you can't ask them to selectively enforce the law. That's not within their oath of office either. Their job, no matter how difficult it is to enforce the law. And if you got a problem with this sandwich law, then you need to be talking to your delegation, your state legislatures, your senators, and your representatives about changing the law. Because all you're doing here is you're throwing slings and arrows against people that are simply trying to do their job, which is no different than what I'm talking about. I went back to my earlier example of our veterans during Vietnam. They were simply doing their duty, and they got criticized for it. Well, our sheriff's departments are simply doing their duty as they see fit. And if you got a problem with that, you're open to criticize them. That's still America. You can criticize them. You have First Amendment rights. But you're criticizing the wrong people. You need to going up to Washington and trying to get that law changed. And likewise down here on the sandwich thing. If you have a problem with the sandwich law, okay, I get that part. But those who are trying to keep this county safe, because one simple example of that is if we have a food outbreak, we don't know how to trace that if it's done somewhere where it's not under control situation. But maybe the law is too extreme. Maybe it is government overreach. I get that part. But again, I tell people, let's make sure that we go after those people who are really responsible for what's being done and not those who are there trying to simply do their duty.
Right. And I talked to the health department about it because I was very familiar with the summer lunch program. And, as a reporter, which I was for many years, there's almost always two sides to a story.
Sure,
and
right.
talking to the health department, they're like, this law's got a good purpose. If somebody gets sick, if some poor kid gets sick from a sandwich made in somebody's home,
Right.
and they have to go to the hospital, there's no insurance from anybody to lean back on to pay those bills.
Or the other part is you don't know which sandwich caused the problem.
No, you'll never be able to trace it.
But again, I have this. I've been in this job long enough to know that sometimes government can be a little heavy-handed. There's always a middle-of-the-road solution. So I'm on the public health board. It's by virtue of my office here. So we had a long discussion about that at our meeting this morning. There is a way we can mitigate some of this. So we're starting to take those measures, starting to implement that. It's late in the ball game, all right? We could have done a better job of creating the story rather than having to react to it. Because as a reporter, once you react to it, you lose. Well, we've lost, all right? Yeah. No matter what we say here, we're just simply trying to, I think people believe we're just simply trying to cover our backside. No. We did not do a good job of communicating what the real intent was here. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But the bottom line here is that these public safety officials, they are committed public servants. And they genuinely believe that they're doing what's best in the best interest of preserving public health in this county. And they run an agency over there where we take a lot of things for granted. There are only about 380 public health officials in this county. And if you saw the multitude of responsibilities that they're responsible for to make sure that, when you eat food at a restaurant, that it is safe. When you go swimming in your swimming pool, that it's safe. I could go on with a long list of things. I don't know when these people sleep.
Yeah. Or when we have a boil water advisory, who tells the restaurants
Absolutely.
that they need to boil their
Right.
water.
So I think here, my message is that America is about give and take. It's about, when you're in the public eye as an elected official as I am and as these people are, they're not elected, but they are in fact public servants, we expect to be criticized. But I think in this case here, the criticism is unwarranted. It's been misdirected. Those who pass the laws, all right, they have to take accountability for them. And sometimes we pass laws where it was well intended, but over time, situations change and perhaps they need to be modified. I think the sandwich law right now is one of those things that need to be looked at. And I, in fact, have already talked to David Wilkerson, Representative Wilkerson, the head of the Cobb delegation, to start that conversation to see if there's something we can do, as well as working with Must Ministry to mitigate some of that. But a lot of those things are already being done. And in the end, we'll find a solution here which always represents the best of Cobb County because of the people we have here.
Yeah. Well, a lot of opportunity for people to have their voices heard in the coming weeks.
But having it other way.
Yep. So if you want to do that, again, check in on our social media sites. CobbCounty.org will have a list of all the public hearings coming up and all the important dates. And we'll be back next week with the chairman for more information about what's coming up in Cobb County. But please stay in touch because there's a lot at stake.
You bet.